isn't it, with these technical questions? Well,
so shake it out and off we go.
Shake it out, yeah, shake it out. And there's also a bit of a time delay, isn't there? Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to have Sascha Haselmayer with me, who's something else, well, from my perspective, because I heard about him and heard about innovative procurement, and I thought, I'm not sure what that is. And then I suddenly looked at it and thought, this is the most important thing I can actually imagine in defending the public interest. And what he did and how I discovered him was through Citymart, an organization that developed innovative procurement, and he ran that for 10 years. Now he's trying to do something else and go to wider horizons of change. But our topic is really procurement as a secret weapon of change. I basically think that it's completely undervalued. And what he's done recently, after 10 years, he reviewed what procurement could be like within the next 10 years and interviewed 60 leaders in the field across the globe. And what he's going to talk about is serving the citizen, not the bureaucracy. So over to you, Sascha.
Well, thank you, Charles. And it's so wonderful to at last do this session with you and to be part of this festival. As you rightly said, the question I asked myself was really, can we say that city procurement at local government level, does it serve the citizens or the government? And that was the opening question I had when I interviewed procurement leaders around the world and experts in the field, academics. And somewhat not surprisingly, everyone said, well, it should be serving the citizen, but in reality, everything is practiced and designed in a way that it's really serving the bureaucracy. And as you rightly said, procurement is one of those things that no one really knows about enough. Everyone thinks it's largely painful. Most people, even professional, thinks it's a purely clerical task. And what I mean by that is that you're processing a workflow, but your actions have no real creative impact. And so what I was really eager to show through this report that we published in June this year was to say, actually, even when we're treating it as an objective and clerical process, we are being creative. We are moving vast amounts of money around through just local government procurement is worth about $6 trillion in 2021 alone. This is 10% of GDP in just about every country, whether you're in Germany, in the UK, in Spain, in the US and Canada. So 10% of our economy is what local government spend. And the reason why local government spending is so interesting is that it doesn't include industrial policy, it doesn't include defense, it doesn't include major national infrastructures. It is just local government services. It is doing what citizens need. So the idea that procurement should be serving the citizen isn't really all that far-fetched. And what we really wanted to look at is most of the practice of procurement focuses on tactical improvements, like what can we do better tomorrow? And we wanted to push the boat out 10 years to say, well, where do we want to go? With all these little improvements we're making, where are we heading? And we felt there was a gap there, and that we tried to describe. And so to illustrate this, I'm really fascinated by how cities around the world over the last 10, 15 years upgraded their street lighting to LED to save energy. Sydney saved millions of dollars in electricity costs and to reduce their carbon emissions footprint. And most of the time, it looks like this, right? We're replacing an old street light, the luminaire, the thing that generates the light, with an LED light that saves the energy. And but in some cities, cities wanted to be creative, and this is what happened in San Diego, where the city bought smart street lights that could do all kinds of other things because they realized LED lights are digital and you can embed all kinds of sensors. But what happened here is that actually it had embedded surveillance technology that was initially designed to just serve the traffic counting, but actually was then used to surveil the Black Lives Matter protests. And the mayor then had to shut down the entire streetlight system because of the public uproar, because of course the public had never bought into the idea of getting monitored and supervised by their streetlights. A much more creative example is what happened in the city of Eindhoven in the Netherlands, where actually the city commissioned the local university to kind of develop a 10-year vision. What does this technology upgrade? What are the opportunities of it? And what they came up with was really something different. They said LED streetlights don't have to look like old streetlights. They can take many forms and shapes. And as you see here, these are glowing pebbles that you can carry around and move around. The Van Gogh bicycle path, which is a bicycle path that glows in the dark instead of having streetlights all around it. So they began to take the technological opportunity as a starting point for civic engagement and involving artists through an annual festival and by commissioning projects to inspire citizens to really at neighborhood level express themselves through this lighting and technology. There's another project here, which is a streetlight that filters out COVID germs. So when you enter the circle, you're actually germ-free. The air is clean and safe. So you can see all these different expressions of an otherwise technical infrastructure. And this is really the power of procurement, to think about, to dream bigger, and then use the tools of procurement, the same money that was spent elsewhere, the same kind of operating cash flow and so forth, but use it creatively and involving the citizens to come up with something uniquely expressive. Now, another thing we found was that even though more than 2,000 cities around the world have declared a climate emergency, have made priorities on inequality, on racism, and many other priorities, actually less than 0.5% of local government procurement can be described as being innovative in the widest sense of the word, meaning also being open to new ideas. So right now, procurement in practice is not really opening the floodgates to change, but is largely keeping us in the status quo. And so we have this kind of creative tension between the potential of transforming services and the reality of the practice. So what we set out as a vision for 2030 is simple in the sense that we said procurement should be a public service. And what we mean by this is that you wouldn't plan a playground, you wouldn't buy a playground in any city in the world anymore without engaging citizens and the public in what makes this playground useful and meaningful to you, what will make you feel that it's yours and you own it. And in the same way, we're speculating about procurement to say, what if we could own it? What if we could participate it in the same kind of ways? So we outline 6 kind of what we call strategic measures, which are really kind of a set of parallel steps to kind of actually start by what we call sharing the dream, bringing together the public, civil society, government, and other stakeholders to jointly actually think about what is the purpose of our spending? What do we want to accomplish? What is important to our community? And then shift the focus, right? To kind of actually move the focus of procurement from serving the bureaucracy to actually becoming really truly citizen-centric and making it work for the community. There's another important part that very few businesses in any city actually take part in procurement. And usually it's businesses that maybe 20 years ago were relevant to what the city needed. But as our values are changing through climate change, through inclusion, through gender equity and many, many other issues, our values are changing and we need a new vendor pool. We need companies and organizations that are actually have the DNA in the right place, so to speak, to be ready to work with us and serve these new needs. There's a call for openness, and openness by design, not openness as a forced transparency. We're now forcing more transparency, but to actually realize that being open, also about failures, also about learning, is actually a way of getting better outcomes and involving everyone. There's an important cultural thing. Procurement, by and large, when you interview people, people will say, well, procurement, they always say no to everything. And even though that is not quite true, there are cities like Liverpool, for example, that proactively really change the culture of the team to be outgoing, to drive innovation, have a diverse set of skills, and really excel at creativity and critical thinking, and not just moving the paper along. And the last really, really important point is when I'm showing the example of Eindhoven, this is only possible when procurement is resourced adequately. And around the world, we found a big difference. In the US, for example, procurement teams are usually 30% underfunded and under-resourced. You can't be creative if you cannot even take care of the most basic part of your work, if you're underfunded. So the idea that this kind of just magically happens, we want to make sure that we're empathetic to the reality of most procurement departments and bureaucracies that do not have the resources to really do more. And unless we invest in it, we cannot show that effect. One really important element of the report, I think, is that we try to make and provide a kind of some tools to help cities make their case for investment, right? We hear this from any department and any function. Anyone will always say, well, give me more money, give me more funding, and I will do better. And in procurement, there is little trust, and little of these processes have been tried. So we're trying to explain to cities, here's what you can gain, and here's also a way you can get there. And so what we found by studying tons and tons of case studies and sifting through procurement data is that a more open and creative approach to procurement actually has significant improvement on quality outcomes. We have in some cases cities that actually spend zero money on something they thought they would spend 9-10 million euros because they used a more creative approach to procurement. We found that on average, you can get 30 to 90% cost savings, right? You can get much better financial results and improve the quality at the same time, get more relevant outcomes because you're actually meeting the needs of the citizens. We found that significant reductions in carbon emissions. Here in Berlin, where I'm right now, the city saved over 1 million tons of carbon emissions every year by rewarding more sustainable products and services. It's a really, really powerful tool. And most of the time, Paris, for example, is now the biggest buyer of organic food in France, and really at almost no cost premium to what they did before. So the idea that change always comes with a huge price tag is actually, when you combine these measures, is not really playing out in the way many people are expecting it to. There's a huge uptick in small business participation when you make procurement more open and creative. And what we found is that instead of getting just 2 proposals for the need of a city, we're actually seeing 23. And a lot of those are coming from minority and women-owned businesses, meaning that the suppliers increasingly look like our citizens. They actually begin to look more, not just more local, but also more diverse. They come with new ideas and they can shine with what they're good at. And last part is what I call the healing democracy part, the part that is about actually opening up procurement in this way, being creative, involving citizens, serving the citizens, really has a huge trust building function. And this is not just about being more accountable as to how money is spent, but it's actually empowering people to play a real role in the process. So this kind of really central question that kind of became super important in our work was this question: should citizens be involved in public procurement? And here we found two really, really distinct worlds amongst the professionals. On the one side, we had practitioners, excellent practitioners, I should say, who said procurement is not something to do with citizens. It's a bureaucratic function with excellent administrators. Ideally, the citizen never hears about this. It just happens, it's well done, it requires high standards of ethics, complex decisions. And at best, maybe we should involve citizens right at the beginning of the process when we want to find out what the needs are. But from then on, it really is just a kind of lean and mean and beautiful machine. And there was another group that said, well, actually, procurement should follow what any other public service has been doing, which is to become more open and more open to participation of citizens, because we know that any public service in which citizens participate becomes better over time. There's enough science behind this, there's enough evidence behind it, and we're doing in just about every service we're running in government. And so the group invested in professionalism really has this kind of linear approach to procurement where you go through the different stages. This is taken from the United Nations Procurement Practitioners Handbook, where you go step by step through the process. And it kind of lends its way to this workflow thinking or linear kind of processing of a complex task. And what we're proposing is something that involves a couple of circles here, right? And anyone who's been involved in any kind of creative or design activity knows that you're never just working through steps, but there are key points. One is when you're defining the need, when you're setting out what problem are we trying to solve, when you're testing your hypothesis, when you're engaging citizens in finding out whether this is what they mean, when you're testing the market, and then later on in the service delivery, rather than saying we're procuring 10 years of street lighting and we cast everything in stone, and then we have these lampposts that do what we set out to do. What they did in Eindhoven was actually to say over 10 years we have a partnership for street lighting, and every day we're asking ourselves, is there something we can do better? Is there something we can change? So it's really, really flexible. It involves the citizens and the companies in constantly revisiting and optimizing and learning and improving. And so the process is changing, right? And we're moving away from this kind of strict linear process to something that involves these little loops along the way. Another part, and this is something really, really close to my heart, is most of the time when we talk about citizen participation in government, we're actually practicing very low quality community engagement. So what you see here is a chart that kind of describes what is called the spectrum of community engagement. We're basically at the lowest level when you're ignoring people, when you're just doing things, you're marginalizing people. And when you're just informing people, really you're just marketing your decisions. You're doing placation, but then at the other end of the spectrum, you get to really delegating power to citizens to really have the community own the decisions and the services. And what is important is to also be realistic that 99.9% of what government does around community engagement is really somewhere between the lower three levels, between marginalization and tokenization. So we may be consulting people on two options, or we're gathering input. But what we're describing here really to unlock this transformative power is to really empower the community to kind of take a level of control. And coming back to that lighting example in Eindhoven, it is the neighborhoods that control what lighting will look like and how it will work. It is not City Hall. City Hall is helping to facilitate the process and provide the infrastructure and so forth, but it's really a local expression that people are creating there. So this is an example of I mentioned playgrounds earlier. There's a fabulous organization called Kaboom in the United States that has helped thousands of communities build community playgrounds. And their playbook for doing this is really to start finding the most prominent site in a community, not putting the playground where it's easy or where it's hidden or where the land is unused, but actually putting it prominently. And then starting with children, what are your dreams about the playground, letting them design the playground, then involving parents, teachers. And what happens, all of this design process culminates in a procurement. The city hall typically, or the school, will procure the basic infrastructure, the leveling of the ground, the foundations, the elements of the playground. But then there is, as you see here, there's a big volunteering event where actually the people in the community, the families, the teachers come together and actually build the playground. So part of the procurement is like the traditional sense of having some contractors moving earth around, but the other part is actually procuring the space and the opportunity for citizens to do the finishing of the project and have this really strong buy-in in the community. And I think this plays out at different scales, right? You can see that play out in Eindhoven. You can see that play out when cities are involving crowdfunding or volunteering at much larger scale in developing solutions. So I mentioned earlier we're in the state of creative tension. And what I mean by this is that on the one hand, we have this promise. Yes, procurement can be this creative engine for change. Every euro, pound, or dollar we're spending could be much better used to kind of reduce carbon emissions, increase diversity, save costs. And at the same time, we're faced with a reality where the departments are underfunded, and often the best way to describe them is a compliance culture. They're defined as a compliance department, and they're not given the opportunity or the purpose of being creative, and we're missing out on all those opportunities. So, and this is really important, right? Because cities, especially with climate change, began to implement all kinds of measures to green their procurement. And what happens there a lot of the time is that you either have directives, meaning administrative rules on how you're becoming greener, or you're training the team and you're hiring people who understand sustainability. So you can do this as a kind of top-down legalistic process, or you can actually change the way people operate. So cities that are going to make progress are going to have to work on a number of areas, and I'll just summarize them here. There's, what is the mission and purpose of your procurement? Why are we doing it? And how are we making choices and the trade-offs between cost and extra value, like climate or engagement? What is citizen engagement going to look like? What is your stance on this? Are you going to involve citizens? And if so, are you doing it well? Or are you saying we're just this department that quietly does the work? What are our sustainability and equity and other goals? And how are we going to accomplish them through procurement? How are we shifting our supplier ecosystem? What is our new culture and staffing going to look like 10 years from now? Who's going to work in procurement? What are they like? How do they relate to one another? How do we measure performance, and what does accountability look like? Are we measuring accountability by whether we avoided legal cases, or are we measuring it by actually delivering better outcomes? And there's an important role for information, data, and technology, especially open data. But I would also say that none of the experts we interviewed said that technology is the answer to procurement. It's a tool, but really most of the action is about who we involve in setting the mission and what is the culture we have to accomplish it. I'll end on something I found really inspiring, which is the way that commissioning is used in the UK, and these are the commissioning principles from Southend-on-Sea Borough Council in the UK. This is not a big city. They're employing 1,800 people in the council, but every single one of them is trained on using creative and design and innovation methodologies in all the work they're doing. So they're transcending the idea that we have a team that is able to be kind of innovative or creative, like the kind of smart guys or like the special, the A team, to saying we're training everyone at City Hall to do this. And it's such a powerful idea to really think about how that creativity that we're describing in procurement is something much broader that penetrates the whole of our government, because the way we spend money is just one part of a process in how we're shaping and creating our relationship to the public. Charles, I think I'll end here and hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Well, I've got not much to say. I mean, I really heard four big messages that really struck me in my mind. One of them, we've got new times. That means new priorities. That means new skills. That means new types of suppliers, not the traditional ones. Secondly, that being creative is not necessarily a cost, but there is a dividend in various ways, from climate emissions to cost savings, quality, etc., etc. Thirdly, that therefore change does not come with a price tag. And fourthly, what I really liked is this sort of learning loop, and that really fits with that bigger agenda about humble government, which is all about, we don't direct things from the top, we're learning as we're doing, we're agile, we're monitoring things along the way, and we're awake and alert. So you've woken me up. Thank you very much, Sascha, and I hope we speak soon some other time. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.